Hello, everybody. Welcome to a special episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I'm Brian Nemhauser. You can find me, all the stuff that we do on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram at Hawk Blogger. You can also find our audio podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, really wherever you get your audio podcast. And if you want ad-free, which who doesn't want ad-free, you can get it at patreon.com/hawkblogger, which also gets you access to the Discord server and a bunch of other stuff where Dayna and other cool people hang out. And we're really happy to be back with you on, what is it, day 3 that we've been here for the Combine. And it's been a pretty eventful day. We actually had a chance, if you caught it earlier, we had an exclusive interview with Mike Macdonald, which was cool. And I think there were some things that came out of that were newsworthy. We then had a podium session, press conference with Mike Macdonald. And then we had a third local beat reporters conversation. There was news in each of those areas that we're going to have to kind of remember. I'm sure we'll forget some of it. And then we also had a chance to talk to some of the edge prospects that were at the podium today. And there were some that have already been linked to the Seahawks based off the fact that we're here and we talked to them. So a lot of really cool stuff to do before we get into all of it. Dayna O'Gorman, it's so nice to see you. It's such a pleasure to be in person with you. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I love the Combine. I think it's just so much fun to get up close and personal with these players and get to know them just a little bit. It just makes it just kind of that much more personal. I love it. And you guys are here, so it's fun.
It's a bonus. I'm realizing I need to take my credential and twist it to the back here. You guys might want to do the same. Jeff Simmons, big thing happened today. Do you want to tell people what it is? You want to guess of what I'm thinking?
I have no idea what you're thinking.
I think you know what I'm thinking. I think it's going to be the thing you're going to tell everybody, the first thing you're going to tell them about today.
Mike Macdonald knew my name.
Yes. Yes. Mike Macdonald. Jeff, hello.
I'm guessing he was tipped off. I don't know. When he came to sit down, I'm sure he's like, who am I in with now? He's
a big fan of Twitter Cop. I'm sure of it. Like
when he saw the short shorts, he can pull those off a lot better than I can.
Yes. There's a ton to go through, and I'm honestly, we're gonna try to make this a little quick. I haven't had a chance to edit the interview with Mike Macdonald, post it, so I apologize for the fact that's going to come a little later today. This will also come a little bit later because I'm going to try to go to the Big Data Bowl after this and get some insights about what's going on there. And then I'll have to break down all of this because, unfortunately, I'm going to have to leave a day earlier. I'm leaving tonight. Jeff's going to be around. Dana's going to be around. They might get some cool stuff, so we'll keep track of that. But let's first talk about what was newsworthy and noteworthy that's happened today. I'll start off with one that for me got me excited. And it was when I asked Mike Macdonald whether if they found another player that had skills like Nick. And before I even finished asking the question, he said, yes. And I'm like, dude, okay. Which made me think he's had his eyes on the same player that we've been talking about. And I'm really curious, like if the Seahawks have an opportunity to draft another player like Nick Eamon-Warry, Mike made it clear that 1, they could work him in. 2, that Nick Eamon-Warry can play outside corner for them. I think that's really meaningful news for the offseason in a lot of ways. 3, he can play deep safety. They have to choose how they want to utilize him, but he's capable of all those. Jeff, I guess we'll start with you. What did you take away from that?
At first, I thought he was just being a little humble and just that's kind of his humor. But the more he got into the answer, it was really interesting. And for me, I wouldn't want them to move Nick Eamon-Warry. I think what he does to match these opposing offenses and what he does for Witherspoon to free him up, and I think playing him as a traditional corner or traditional free safety or back safety would almost take away from what he does well and what that unlocks. But again, it does give you the versatility. If you want to add another guy, EMW from Toledo is the guy we've been thinking about the whole time.
Emmanuel McNeil Warren. I don't know that enough people know to know EMW.
So you got EMW, Eamon-Warry. It's a very natural duo there, but I can see why Mike would want to do that. Me personally, I would want to leave Eamon-Warry in the role he is now.
Yeah, well, Dayna, when you get maybe the guy that's getting the most credit in the NFL now for being a defensive mastermind saying, yeah, give me another guy that can do a bunch of different things well, and I'll figure it out. I've kind of reached the point where I'm like, I trust him. He'll figure it out.
Right? Totally would trust him. And here's the interesting thing. The versatility is what makes this defense so good, right? That they have all these different moving pieces and things that they can do. If you can add another guy who also is versatile like that, I mean, why not? I think that would be, it would be nothing but beneficial. Now, do I think there's another Nicky Manwari out there? No, I think he's kind of more of a unicorn than that. But if you get someone who has close to his skill set, why not?
Yeah. So I thought that was, even if they don't draft EMW, I think the fact that he said that Nick could play corner for them if they want also has implications on how much they would spend on Josh Jobe and Devin Witherspoon, because, you know, they might feel like they could get a nickel corner, that they feel like their best setup would be Worry and Witherspoon on the outside and another nickel on the inside. Like, that opens up potential for how they can. I've been basically totally discounting nickel corners when I look in the draft class, because I just don't think they need another one. But this gives them a little bit of flexibility, and this is a good corner class.
And so the big thing that you imagine what's going to happen, just hearing from John Harbaugh yesterday, everyone's going to be studying Seattle this offseason. How do we attack them? How do we beat them? So it's going to be really important for Mike and those guys to be a step ahead. And they've admitted they're a little behind right now in their draft coverage, but having the next answer to the question, because, you know, McVay's sitting in the lab trying to figure out how to beat them, and he already did a pretty good job, but I'm sure Shanahan's sitting there. What do I do this year? I'm sure all these guys who get hired. John said it yesterday. John Harbaugh said it yesterday. We are studying Leslie Frazier. We're studying Mike Macdonald. So having all these chess pieces and all these versatile options, I imagine that's kind of the next genesis of where this defense can go. And he even talked about the first game where they really got after them, that he probably put too much in. And was trying to add like the next layer of the defense. But when you're bringing so many of these guys back and then could add another layer of what you can do, I think that's going to be super important when everyone's going to be trying to figure out how to beat them next year.
Yeah. Well, there's other things that were newsworthy, I thought, and I'm probably going to forget some of them. So please remind me if I do. But, you know, I asked him about AI. Well, I asked him about basically models and scouting models and, you know, basically analysis models for how formations are done. And he went directly into a pretty long answer about AI and how it's going to be a big part of what's going on. And he was even like, oh, the big data bowl is happening here. He was kind of like, oh, okay.
He perked up.
Yeah. So I think it's noteworthy that the Seahawks have gone from a coach in Pete Carroll, who was great in so many ways, and I think wanted to embrace analytics, but I don't think really was necessarily of the generation to really fully understand or didn't come up with it, to a coach that really sees it. Not only does Mike get it, but the career he was going to be in was numbers, and for him to have the ability to understand how that can give them an edge, I don't think you can underestimate or overestimate how impactful that could be in terms of creating another area of advantage for the Seahawks. Because look, I think in a few years, maybe it's 2 years, maybe it's 3 years, maybe it's 5 years, there's going to be this thing of which teams have the best model that's giving them an advantage. And these models are going to be going back and forth because they're going to say, oh, you're giving this tell. Now we're giving you this in response. And whoever's got the best machinery will be in a real better situation. So I thought that was notable how much he had to say on that topic.
Yeah, and when he was talking about some of the additions they've made to the coaching staff, one of the guys they've added was Daniel Stern. And when he talked about him today, he was saying he had like a 4-dimensional mind.
Yeah.
I didn't really know what that meant, but maybe Dana's smarter than I am. But I think that's all part of it. I think they're looking for that next layer of how you can use analytics. We talked to a former colleague of John Schneider, and that will probably come out later. But he was talking about John is super old school scout and pairs really well with Mike. And we even told, and you'll get some good stuff from there. But all of this is just showing Mike is on that stuff. And go ahead, Eric DaCosta last year, me and Brian, I think he did an interview down here with Todd McShay, and he was talking about the Ravens modeling. And I think, Brian, you asked him a little yesterday. I don't know how deep he got on that, but this is the environment Mike grew up in. He's a data guy.
I think that there has to be the balance, right? So John is old school.
Yeah.
Then you have Mike. And the more information, the better, right? You want as much information, want as much data as you can, but it's what you do with it, right? At that point. And do you rely too heavily on it? Do you not rely enough on it? There has to be a great balance. And so far from what we've seen, the Seahawks really seem to have that perfect balance so far of both the eye test and the data test.
Yeah, I think it's a really well
David
said.
Lombardi just walked in.
Oh, well, that's just great. Let's keep on to meaningful news.
Sorry, I was just like, I'm like, this
this
is
is
the first
just
time I've seen him in the
this is
flesh.
just like a knee-jerk
I got like
reaction.
shivers down my
Yeah,
spine. Sorry,
yeah.
guys.
It's as I said, it's Seahawks won multiple Lombardi trophies with him in the locker room. So there's a bunch of other stuff, and please again, like remind me of stuff. But news that happened in the small beat reporter scrum was I asked Mike Macdonald if I asked him if they had finalized the quarterback's coach or any of that, and he said they're not ready to share that they're getting close. Two, I asked him if all the coaches that are currently with them are going to stay with them, and the implication there was I was a little wondering if like Jake Peets might choose to move elsewhere or something like that. He said, no, everyone that's with us is expected to stay with us. So that means Jake Peets is going to stick around, Justin Outen's sticking around, John Benton, like anyone that you thought might be leaving is not. So they haven't finalized all the titles. There's probably some more to do there, but that to me was notable.
Yeah, a lot of the narrative when Seahawks hired Brian Fleury was, well, maybe their coaches are going to be pissed off, or they retained pretty much all of them. And Brian, I think that was your first take from your first impressions of Fleury when he first got hired. Was the value of it was that they could keep the staff intact, and Jake Peets was the guy that people were wondering because when I think it was you or someone who asked about him last year when they hired Kubiak was asked about Jake Peets, and they said he's not even in consideration, and that kind of took me back because he had done interviews from other teams, he'd been a play caller. He was in that Peter King list. And so that's very telling news. And to retain him, to retain Outen, to retain John Benton, which when the Kubiak stuff started coming out, some people were like, well, do I care that much? I was super worried about losing Benton. So to retain all three of those guys and add Fleury, I think that's super important for their offseason.
Well, and it's pretty rare, right? Because normally when you lose a coordinator, you lose a bunch of your staff because they're kind of loyal to that coordinator and they'll go with them. And the fact that Seattle that didn't happen, I think just speaks volumes of this team and where people want to go and where they think the team is projected to go.
Yeah, it's very true. And I think people want to be here. I love the interaction with Jeff and Mike Macdonald about the story about him meeting Zach Orr's brother and how Mike liked that. And, you know, you've got a guy who's excited to be here. And I think there's a lot of people that kind of want to be with the Seahawks right now. There were other things that I'm spacing on there, but my mind's gonna go to another spot, which was, I asked him like why. 2 different times I kind of came out why in a shortened off season when a lot of other coaches don't come here at all, why are you still coming here? And he gave a couple good answers, but I also asked in the podium session about like they've kind of established an identity, and a lot of people are here with measurables. How important is it for you guys to meet these people and assess whether they're actually fits as people? And his answer I thought was really cool. He was just like, yeah, that's why I have all my coaches here. John wants to know what we think. I want to know what my coaches think. It's an extra data point. It's an extra edge from our perspective to get to know these guys. And no, we don't think we know them better after 20 minutes than the scouts who've been spending all this time, but they value that. And I got to admit, maybe just because I do value people, like I think you all know that, I value the connection, the relationships. I believe it matters. So when you have the Sean McVays and the Kyle Shanahans and those coaching staffs are like, screw that, spit out a number. We'll do a Zoom call. We're smarter than everybody else. We don't need that. I like that the team I cheer for is like, no, it matters. And that locker room was every bit as much of a reason why they won, maybe the number one reason why they won the Super Bowl, and those guys didn't. Yeah. So I thought that was newsworthy.
And it was. And we've talked to some people just down here who have been a little taken back by some of the Rams' arrogance and it's not people who are kind of like us who have a built-in bias against them. It's other people who are just national guys. And so we've been told by a couple of people, there's a lot of pushback on that, but they've drafted really well, the Rams. So you've wondered, but Mike told a story on our show earlier of how.
Can I pause you real quick?
Yeah.
they've drafted really well for the players. But what did we hear from some of those good players after this last game? We didn't know what to do. We shut down.
Exactly.
So that's the person. That's not the player.
No, they could not handle adversity.
Yes.
They could not handle losing. And Jared Versus quotes, who's the alpha, and he broke down after Darnold having one drive.
Yeah.
It was so embarrassing, and it said so much about how their team kind of is.
Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, but we were talking to Mike earlier, and I think he said on our show that one of the picks that had to be the toughest to make in the building was Riley Mills, who had the late season ACL, and they had to obviously do the medical on him. But he said those meetings with him down here are what pushed that pick over the edge. And Riley Mills didn't do much during the year, but he talked at the podium when I asked him again about Riley Mills, how that series and that sack helped them kind of pull away in the game. And so a little thing like that, a little edge. And I've always thought like just sitting down and like John said yesterday how like they come here for free agency and not so much like watching drills. I thought that was super telling for Mike.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do think it's interesting as we, as reporters, we stand in front of these kids. They're at a podium for maybe 15, 20 minutes, and we get to ask 2 questions. And I leave that with an impression of who they are and how they are. So getting to sit down and ask very pointed questions about who they are and what they want, they're going to get a feel of who that is. And I think that is really important to some teams. It's obviously not important to every team, but there are a lot of teams where personality does matter to a certain extent because it has to be cohesive with what they want. They maybe don't want, a kid who's super arrogant or a kid who has the giant chip on his shoulder or whatever it may be. And so if I feel like I get an impression of who someone is in just those couple of questions, I'm sure it's helpful for them.
I agree. I think that's wise. And that does remind me of the conversation we had with Brian Brodus. Is that the name?
Yeah.
Yes. So Jeff, set up who Brian is for people that don't know.
So Brian is sort of like the OG of the combine. Like he worked with the Packers back in the day. And he pivoted out of the GM side of the business. He never was GM and got into media early. He became like one of the early guys on the draft. And he's been coming down to the combine. Like I heard him talking with Dane Brugler. We were standing right there. And they were talking about how 4 people used to cover the combine. So this guy's he's like famous in Dallas, famous in the scouting community. And after John's podium yesterday, John lit up because he saw Brian and he went over and hugged him. And I don't think John loves doing the media. I think you can tell. I think he's admitted it on your show.
Yes, he did.
I've never seen him hug another media member before, so I made note of that. And we were walking by this morning. I'm like, Brian, we should talk to that dude. We had an incredible conversation with him. Maybe the best conversation we've had since we've been down here.
I will post the full interview later. But so John was an intern for him.
Yes,
he interned for him in Green Bay, and one of the things that Brian talked about was, John didn't necessarily want to draft big personality, big,
really interesting,
edgy guys. But Pete told him, I can coach him. And so John got out of his comfort zone during that period of time to draft those guys. I thought that's really telling about then what happened and the fact that there's a lot of evidence that John's been pretty clear. He wasn't comfortable with all the drama that came out of that and how to deal with all those people and all that stuff. It was a different personality type than he's kind of comfortable with. Doesn't mean that obviously it worked, but now that he is the one making the call and the one hiring the coach, you see that the kind of personality types that John is comfortable with. And I do think there's a real difference. And we've talked about it a bunch. This isn't net new, but the fact that Brian Brodus shared that, I thought was pretty cool.
That was my number one takeaway when we talked to him, just because we've always wondered over the years, like Jamal Adams and Jimmy Graham and all these guys. And I'm probably just sitting there picturing Pete being like, give me this guy. Like I can do anything with him. Like I always wondered why they got Percy Harvin. I always wondered. I know it didn't work out, but it just didn't fit. But that was who Pete got at USC. Like these were the kind of guys that Bruce Irvin, like that's such a Pete pick. And knowing where John came from, Green Bay, which is pure, just football all the time. They got Reggie White, but over the years, it's just a football. And he went to Kansas City with Marty Schottenheimer. Dana, you know a lot about how that town works. Just football. Like those organizations were different. And now that's his organization. We're seeing a lot more of that. And I can't remember if it's on this show or at the podium yesterday. He had a huge smile when he was talking about this team has no drama.
Yeah.
And he's like, I like that.
Yeah.
And so you look at the guys they've drafted. It's Nicky Manmori was probably more of a Mike-driven pick, I'd guess. But you really see a shift to Marcus Lawrence, the guys they've brought in, Cooper Kupp. it's really John's show now. And hearing that comment from him that John just really focuses on getting his coaches who they want, it really does explain a lot of the first 10 years of what happened here.
Yeah, the other thing that I meant to share, I don't know if I've shared this with you guys yet. So in the little reporter scrum, Mike was asked about DeMarcus Lawrence, Jaron Reed. Any word on whether they're, coming back? There's a report that DeMarcus was considering retirement. And he said, as of now, we're expecting both of them back. We haven't heard anything. No, that could change. But, for people that are maybe thinking that, there's also, I don't know how much this is news or not, but people have been sharing all sorts of false rumors. They do not have an invitation from the White House yet. They have not turned down an invitation from the White House yet. Mike Macdonald was asked about, have they gotten? And he said, I expect that we're going to get one. That's usually how it works, but I don't know. And then he was asked, if you get an invitation, will you go? And he's like, we'll wait till we get an invitation. We'll have that conversation. He was asked, well, how will you decide? Is it going to be, a team vote? And he's like, we'll handle that, when we get there. So I think he handled the whole question process pretty well. But for people that are kind of curious about that side story, there's not been an invitation yet. The Seahawks have not declined an invitation. That was another little bit there. What else? There was other stuff that came out, but we'll get to the edge guys that we talked to in a little bit. But anything else?
The draft pick, number of draft picks. Remember the?
Yes. Would you like to share about that?
He was asked about Mike at his podium was asked about having a lower number of picks, and I can't remember. You remembered the exact word you say? Well, for now,
he said, yeah, it was something along the lines of, maybe it was for now, it won't, maybe it won't stay that way.
Yeah,
or something
exactly. Which, because we've all been curious whether or not they will trade out of that 32nd pick. We have seen that in the past with the Seahawks, not necessarily with this coach though. So it'll be interesting to see how they maneuver with that. I think the expectation, at least mine is that they will get rid of that pick and get more, but you never know. There might be some guy sitting there that they just have to have. So
that's a good. Thank you for reminding me. That was also definitely news. What else?
That was one of the bigger takeaways. He didn't get too deep into the player. No one really asked him about personnel, and I think that's probably smart. What's he gonna say about a Woolen or Bryant? Or he's gonna love them up, but
he'll pull a John Schneider like he did yesterday when Schneider said, "That's a really nice drive."
I did ask him in the small reporter scrum about Ty Okada, and what his development helps, and his answer was kind of indirect. He was just like, we're going to have guys. We're going to coach the hell out of every single one of them. He used a different adjective there or expletive. And that's going to give us an opportunity that when something happens, like what happened to Julian Love, we're going to have someone that steps up and can step in there. So I continue to think that the Ty Okada thing is a pretty impactful aspect of how they're developing. I also asked him about Nehemiah Pritchett. He said, we're really excited about his development. He called him Mighty is his nickname for people that don't know. And, I don't know exactly what that means, but he was pretty enthusiastic. And then I also asked him about the right guard spot.
Okay, I was going to actually ask you if you had an Anthony Bradford question.
I did. I asked him about the right guard spot, and do you expect there to be competition at that spot? I can't post the audio for that, unfortunately, because I think I can use the audio on the show, but I can't post it because it's a long story, but I can't. So his short answer was essentially Anthony Bradford played really well for us last year. I'm not.
Do they have to hold you back?
These are not my words. I'm just saying.
It's Brian's
chest was puffed out. Yeah.
I don't.
No,
oh my God. Basically it's it's nice to not be absolutely crazy.
Yeah, you're like, I'm not crazy.
I'm not crazy. And they're like, Anthony, he's like, Anthony Bradford played well for us last year. He's a big part of our offense. He's still developing, and I thought he would bring up some stuff. He kind of implied that, we'll see how things go. I thought he was going to bring up Bryce Cabledew. I intentionally didn't name them because I wanted to see if when I asked about the right guard, whether he's going to say, yeah, we're really excited about some of the guys coming up. He didn't do that. I don't think it means that they're not going to do anything at right guard. It was surprising. He said his pass protection was a big help in keeping a pocket for us. I'm like, Interesting. That's not where I would have focused.
You sure about that?
Yeah.
You know that meme? Yeah.
So I don't know that I don't think it means that they're not going to do anything at that position, but I do think that it's not nearly as dire as fans would like to imply.
They don't see it as
they
dire.
don't see it as dire.
Mhm.
Yes. Let's talk about some edge guys, and then we'll come back and see if our memories jogged a little bit at all. So Dayna, any folks that you got to talk to, anyone like whether they're connected with the Seahawks or not, anyone that stood out to you?
Well, I did tell you that great little story. I thought it was funny. So there is a defensive lineman named Brandon Cleveland. He's out of NC State, and out of completely unprompted, I mentioned nothing about. No one had mentioned anything about the Seahawks to him, and I posted this over on our turf. He mentioned Drake Thomas, and he brought him up and said what an inspiration he was, that he had just won a Super Bowl and that he had gone undrafted, and how that he was just so inspired by him. And I thought that was a great little. This isn't a superstar name. This isn't, one of the huge bigwigs that people outside of the Seattle Seahawks would know off the, top of their head. And so I found it really interesting that he picked him. Granted, they, both the same college, but I just found it really interesting that he called him such an inspiration. And I loved that. I loved that for Drake. I thought that was great.
That's cool. Yeah, I want to see that up on the ArtTurf account later. Jeff, you talked to some folks. Who stood out to you?
Yeah, we talked to Zion Young for a while, who was a guy who had met with the Seahawks.
So let's say that with our chest, so people don't know that has not been reported yet.
Yes,
Zion Young has confirmed to have a meeting with the Seahawks.
Yeah, we were talking to some people around the building who said he's kind of a scout's favorite. He's a guy who a lot of the scouts like. There was a lot of questions about his DUI late in the season. Obviously, he didn't get into that very much, but he was a pretty confident kid. He was excited. And there was a couple other guys where we got to ask them whether they've watched the Seahawks defense. And there was a guy from Duke who was really excited about the Seahawks. And there's another one I talked to.
Well, let's go one by one. Let's go one way. So let's start with Zion Young. So we've talked about him.
Yeah.
Let's talk about our impression. So one, he has met with the Seahawks. We did have a conversation, as you said, with somebody who I really trust, or we really trust, in terms of doing background and also being connected with what other people are saying. And basically no red flags was the highlight. Was like it. Yes, people are trying to mark him off the board. That's not the impression I'm getting from that source.
No, and I saw Brian's first mock draft when you were playing with the simulators. That's who you picked. So yeah. I saw some people get ready to go at you with the DUI link. And
yeah. So I think that I don't think it's a non-issue, but I don't think it's a disqualifier. But then as far as impression of the person, you had some thoughts. Share your thoughts.
He seemed a little, what's the lack of word? Loopy.
He had some odd, his speaking style was a little unique.
He didn't seem like the kind of player that the personality that they've drafted. He seemed like he couldn't answer a couple questions pretty coherently, and he seemed very confident in himself.
Yeah.
But I came away thinking, I don't know if that's their guy.
I did I asked him about, hey, a lot of people focus on pass rush, but run defense is a big part of the game. How have you worked on that? And he said, yeah, someone told me my PFF grade got a lot better this year. That was kind of funny. And
that's when I started leaving, though. That's why I didn't like him, right?
And it was not that that's the thing I care about, but it was cool. He's like, I had not been as good on that side early. I've worked on it. And he's like, what I've been told is good edge players, good defensive line players can play a gap and a half.
Yeah.
And, I want to be a guy that can do that. And so I didn't think he was nearly as disqualifying as Jeff. I don't think you've marked him off, but I think you were
I was taken back.
The personality was not your favorite.
He just didn't seem like McDonald has such an affinity for the high IQ player. I talk about this a lot. Who's the first guy they paid when he got hired? Julian Love.
Yeah.
Who might be the smart? You were around him from just hearing him talk. He might be one of the smartest football IQ guys. We've all seen that clip from the Super Bowl where he identified where Drake May's shoulder was being turned over, and that's how he got that interception. DeMarcus Lawrence, he's brilliant. Leonard Williams talking to Gray Zabel on the sidelines. Gray Zabel, we've seen these guys. And when he was kind of talking about run defense at first, he's like, yeah, I didn't really care about run defense until the last year where And I'm like, really? But he had a good answer. He had a good answer. He was very honest.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm misreading this, but he didn't seem to fit kind of what I've identified as like Ernest Jones. He's brilliant.
Yeah, I wouldn't say. I don't know that Nick would have fit that.
No, he wouldn't have,
if you heard him last year at the podium, and there's a few other guys I'm not sure would have met that bar. So I didn't find it like, oh no, this isn't going to work. I thought generally it was fine, and his tape to me was good enough where I'm like, yeah, as long as they think he fits, I think he's a prospect for this team. Now we'll see how he tests and all that stuff. But that wasn't the only guy. You mentioned the guy from Duke, Wesley Williams, who is really low on boards. He's like 260th or something on. You can let me know when you got a cough and I'll lower it. But
I just want everyone to take it in.
Yes. Everybody wants a little bit of Jeff on him. So I looked him up. He's like 260 or 80th or something on the PFF board. But I noticed he had like an 80 plus run defense grade, and he was in the 260 range. So nobody else was talking to him.
We went over there.
Nobody else. And he was like, talk about engaging, bright, smart, like really articulate. I think he said he's going to go pre-law. I think he's going to like law school. Anyway. And, I asked these guys, hey, did you watch the Seahawks play? Because it's fun to ask that question right now. And he's like, oh, yeah. I loved it. He's like, everyone's saying this is the most boring Super Bowl ever. They don't know what they're talking about. Like, as a defender, I was like, that was amazing. And I asked, like, why? Like, what did you see? And he talked about the fact that these guys were, like, playing for each other, and they were playing so hard. And, like, he's like, I loved it. And I was like, have you talked to the Seahawks? Yes, I've talked to the Seahawks. Now, he's not going to be your first round pick, but he might be your 6th round pick. Though, he might be later on in the draft. And as we'll keep going through, it's clear the Seahawks have their eye on the edge spot. No question about it. Any other additions you had on the guy from Duke?
Pretty much the inverse of what we were talking about before. Probably doesn't have the film that Zion Young would.
Yeah.
His first impression was really strong. Obviously, it doesn't. Probably a 5th, 6th round guy, maybe even lower. But he was beaming when you asked him that, and I started stealing that question, asking with everyone. I thought it was a good way to get them going. But he said, like, everyone thought the Super Bowl was boring, but as a defensive player, I was jumping out of my seat, and that's how we felt as Seahawks fans. But hearing that from a guy who had no ties to Seattle, he had this beaming smile. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting tricked by first impressions, but
yeah,
he really was just an engaging guy. Maybe because he had such a small podium turnout, and we were there to ask him like genuine questions about, have you met with this team? And that's it. It was really cool to see how excited he got. And again, we talked to multiple edges that mentioned Seattle. So
yeah, we'll get to a couple more. Dayna, I mean, you talked to Robbie Utes last year at a small table that nobody else was talking to, and he was pretty engaging, and nobody had him going anywhere. He went to Seattle.
Yeah.
So
you never know those. We call them the small table guys, but those are usually the guys that are the most engaging. They haven't maybe had quite the podium training that some of these other guys have had, but yeah, they're a lot of fun. I will mention one other guy. I will tell you, I have not seen him play. I don't know his stats. I don't know where he'll rank, but he made an impression on me, and his name is Josh Josephs. He's out of Tennessee, and he was standing there, and he came up there, and he was really irritated at first because they had the wrong name up there, and so then they took that down because the guy before him didn't show, and so then he came back. And he was very serious, and he's having this whole conversation, and people are asking him all these football questions. And then Stacey Dales, God love her, she goes, so tell me about the Jamaican food your mom makes. He completely changed into a different person. His mom owns a Jamaican restaurant in Georgia, and he thinks he can't cook the oxtails like his mom did, but anything like that. And he was just like so lighthearted and so happy. And then someone asked him a football question. Instant change, right back into that super serious, I'm super focused, whoever he is, that sort of guy. And I thought that to me shows a certain level of understanding the difference between football and life. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And that can be really important. Again, like I said, I know nothing about the kid, but it just made an impression to me that this was his job, this was his happy, and it was a complete change. And I found it interesting.
I think Rob Staten had him going to Seattle in one of his mock drafts recently. So that's how I started looking at Jonathan Josephs and
I'm just looking at Josh Josephs. For people that don't know, because I didn't know, I mean, he is 6'3", 240. So he's pretty light for a Mike Macdonald end. I mean, again, for people that don't know, I think 255 is about as light as you get for a Mike Macdonald end until we see otherwise. But he did have a 90.6 pass rush grade and a 77 run defense grade. I'll tell you though, I mean, again, my first like quick to get filtering is the weight. Are they between 255 and 270, maybe 275? And then the next thing I look at is run defense grade. And then I look at pass rush. And so he does qualify based off of that. And he's been pretty consistent through his career. He's not a high sack guy, but he is a guy that's gotten some pressure. So he's a guy I will look at. That's an interesting one.
I just really enjoyed that. I mean, he had great takes for football. He seemed like he really understood the game and really understood all that. But I love those guys that seem to understand the separation. And I don't know. He was very interesting to me.
Yeah, and I talked to another edge, our Mason Thomas, who I think was a little smaller. He's supposed to go in the second round, third round, maybe early second. But he had also met with the Seahawks. And
who's this?
Our Mason Thomas.
Our Mason Thomas.
Yeah.
Yes.
So he was supposed to be one of the earlier podiums, and him and one of the guys I was waiting for never came until the end.
Yeah.
But when I got there was no one at his booth, and I was asking him about the Seahawks, and he lit up too. And I got the video clip of him talking about it. I stole Brian's question, have you watched them play? And he had, and I think there were questions about whether he was going to work out. He said he had a quad injury, but he was saying he wants to run 4.4. He said he'd be pissed if it's 4.5. And I think people aren't sure whether he's like an every down player.
Yeah.
But he's a good pure pass rusher, speed rusher.
So
that's what they're really missing with Mafe, who got a lot better run defense.
So he is one of the guys that popped up on my ones to watch list that I had been looking at. And so I waited at his podium forever for him to show up, and he wasn't there. But he's been kicked around quite a bit. His name has popped up for me quite a bit.
Interesting. So he's 6'2", 250. So he's closer weight-wise. Had a 90.4 pass rush grade, had a 79.4 run defense grade. So if you're lighter and you're still setting the edge and having like a decent job there, that's pretty great. Also had an 86.5 true pass rush grade. For folks that don't know, those are like filtering out like the screen passes and the quick throwaways and the things where you don't really have an opportunity to even rush the passer. So if you do well there, he had a 20.3 pass rush win rate. That's about as high as I've seen for an edge player in this class. So that's an interesting name. I have not watched his tape yet, so I will now have an assignment to go do that.
Yeah, if you move off 32 and maybe go down a little bit, like that could be a pick in that middle second round range where I don't know if he'll get to 64.
Yeah.
But I don't think he'll go 32, but depending on how he works out and how the interview goes. He mentioned that he had met with Seattle, so that was another one on our list.
So that's 3, right? Yeah. 3 that have met. And then I spoke to Logan Fano, who is an edge player from Utah, and he was at a table, not a podium, like the little guy, little tables. And his brother is like the #1 tackle prospect in this class, also played at Utah. And he was really great. I'll have the full interview. I'll post that later. But he's a guy that fits the mold, is in the 260 range. And he had some injuries a little earlier in his career, but has put on a lot of weight. And so I don't know if I said his first name right, but Logan Fano. And the thing that stuck out to me about him was 6'5", 260. So right in the wheelhouse. And then his run defense grade is 77. And I asked him about run defense, and he's like, that was probably something I've worked on more than anything else. I was like, well, what'd you work on? He's like, weight, strength. Like I was 230 when I got there. I'm 265 now.
Wow.
So he really has put in that effort. And he's like, when I got here, I was all about pass rush. And so that's something he's worked on. He's gone up against his brother, who's, again, the best tackle in the class. And he was really personable. And he was like, oh, yeah, I've been talking to Connor O'Toole, who went to Utah and is, on the Seahawks ready squad. And I asked him if he had watched the Seahawks, and he lit up, talking about them. And I was like, have you met with them? He's like, yes. So it was like hit. Like everyone we were talking to, like on the edge side, had talked to the Seahawks. So again, he is not going to be a guy you're going to be first round, second round, maybe not even fourth round, but he could be a guy that you look at in later rounds as a developmental prospect.
Yeah, when me and you are doing our day 3 draft show, which we'll probably be doing.
Yes.
It's good to know these guys now.
It is. Well, we got a lot more work to do, brother. I did not get a chance to talk to Danae. I thought it's Danny, but it's Danae Dennis Sutton, the edge rusher. Did he ever come out? Do we know?
I don't think so.
I don't think he did either. Like there was this thing that happens where sometimes, like last year, remember it was like 2 hours, 2.5 hours before the defensive lineman came out.
Yep.
So some guys just never came out.
Yeah.
I was waiting for Messidor from Miami because we talked to him yesterday. I wanted to ask him about Elijah Arroyo, and he's Canadian, so I wanted to ask him a little about that. We were there. He never came.
Yeah. I'm looking through the list to see if there was anyone else that we spoke to.
There was a story about the Michigan defensive end that we were talking about yesterday. Moore.
Oh, Derek Moore. Yeah.
Apparently he got hurt, and he's going to be out basically until April, so he's not going to be doing any testing. And
interesting. Yeah, we asked someone offline a little bit about him as well, and they see him as like a really solid day 2 kind of pick that, is just kind of okay at everything, but doesn't jump out as necessarily like a big disruptor. I have not seen film of him yet where I got excited. It feels a lot of slow developing stuff. Seems strong. Seems like a Michigan guy. Like he'll put the physical side in there, but I didn't see the upside to where I'd want to spend a day 1 or honestly a day 2 pick on him.
I talk about those day 2 pass rushers a lot, especially at the bottom of the round. There's not a lot of hit rates there. I remember even when Derek Hall got drafted, our enthusiasm was kind of iffy, and he's turned into a super good power player. But there's just not AJ Epinesa is a free agent. He was kind of in that range. Right?
Mm-hmm.
He's okay at everything, but he's not great. Those guys, it's hard to find the zone for them.
Yeah.
And so he kind of fits that mold where he's fine at everything, but what's he really good at? And are they going to spend a pick on that?
Well, especially with the limited number that they have.
Right.
See if Ben Solak wants to rate our offseason.
But I do think that is kind of the theme of this draft, right? There just seems to be a large group of people that are really perfect in 3 and 4, right? Rounds 3 and 4. That's the 2s, that sort of thing. So eventually someone's going to have to maybe quote unquote reach for someone if there's someone they feel really strongly about. But there seems to be a lot of depth. And I think that's perfect for Seattle this year.
Yes.
They don't have a ton of
yes.
They don't have a ton of picks. They don't have, these huge needs. They just need some of those depth pieces. So this is actually a really good draft for them.
I am really bumming that I'm not going to get to be here tomorrow to talk to some of the defensive backs, the corners, the safeties. Like I was really looking forward to that day. And I'm also not going to be here Friday to be able to talk to the receivers. There's some really interesting receivers in this class. So that's a bummer for me. I'm excited that you guys are going to be here, and maybe we'll be texting and like, did you talk to?
Oh, you're going to be that backseat driver.
I know I am.
Oh yeah, I might get fired by tomorrow.
There, do you ever watch that show on Prime? Oh my gosh, it's based off of the video game. Forgetting. Anyway,
The Last of Us.
Fallout. Yes,
Fallout.
thank you. And they have the little thing, the chip they put in the back of the necks to like remote control. Jeff, just be aware. I'm working on one. I don't think I'll be ready by tomorrow.
Yeah, this explains a lot.
All right. Well, so let's wrap with any other thoughts. Anything that we haven't talked about that stood out to you guys today that people should know.
Can I give a little thought on something?
Anytime.
So because at Our Turf I cover all 32 teams, I try and get a little bit from all the coaches that are here. And I mentioned this to Jeff today. I got some video of Vrabel's press conference this afternoon. He just looks sad. Like he was like his head was low and he was just talking really softly and there was no excitement. And I'm like, maybe he's just tired. Maybe that's it. But I don't know. This much of me felt a little bad for the dude, but at the same time, I kind of giggled. So
it's really funny.
It's funny. I think we talked about it in our show yesterday when we were talking, kind of name dropping. Me and Brian were walking around the JW Marriott, and we saw him walk by a couple times. I think we were literally talking about this yesterday. It was interesting that carried over. He looked sad.
The other interesting one for outside of Seattle, thought process is Todd Monken, the new Cleveland Browns coach. He had the biggest scrum, like
my
for
God.
miles. That guy, everyone's all about him, and he was just this dude in the blue hoodie.
It was
Like,
so weird because like you see how like jacked some of these coaches are, like
Yeah.
Mike and Ben Johnson, some of these other guys, and he just shows up. He's like a 60-year-old guy with like a giant hoodie, sweatpants. He has the loudest voice, and we were talking about this with some people last night. Like I used to cover hockey in Canada, and that's kind of like the Dallas Cowboys in the NFL.
yeah.
I got a sense of what the Browns are like, and we were looking at their like beat writer scrum, and Dana were laughing versus like the Seahawks beat writer scrum, which had like 6 people.
I think that's a story in and of itself. That to me, there has not been like a high demand for John Schneider, for Mike Macdonald. There hasn't been this, like, I think maybe the media rounds, but not there wasn't like a large portion of people to attend their press conferences. I think people still don't care about the Seahawks.
I think you're right.
It's kind of shocking is the wrong word, but to me it's a
Annoying.
little surprising that like they just dominated this league and won the Super Bowl going away, and everyone's like, yeah, pass.
Yeah, it's true.
Good,
absolutely
good,
right.
like
Yeah.
good. Like let us continue to just rip that respect out of their cold dead hands as we leave them littered along the trail of our victories. So, whatever, but it was pretty surprising to me.
Yeah, I thought for sure John Schneider's scrum would be bigger. I was really surprised by that. But what are you gonna do?
Because I'm looking around, like I see like a Brown show over there, and there's a huge presence from Buffalo here. I used to cover the Bills. We had dinner with a guy from Buffalo the other night, and there's a bunch of Buffalo tables, and there's like I think one of the reasons we started this was that we felt that there was kind of a gap in the Seahawks coverage, and it kind of excites me seeing that it's so small still. Just shows that there's more for us to do.
That's right.
Yes, there is. All right. Anything else?
Not till tomorrow.
I would be curious to know what like Mike's thoughts are. I would have liked to ask him what his thoughts on free agency in general are, because they saw like the big 1-year difference. They missed on basically every free agent in 2024, and that was when someone asked Mike if they had the alignment coming out right away, and he kind of lied in his answer. He was like, "Well, I did with John, but we know what happened with him and Ryan Grubb and some of those coaches." But you saw the difference when they had the alignment, how they use free agency. And his old boss was saying the other day they don't use free agency really at all. But they don't win that Super Bowl without even Josh Jones and some of those guys.
Yeah.
DeMarcus Lawrence. So I'd be curious to know what his view on free agency is as a coach versus John. I think we know by this point he doesn't like day one free agency. Every free agent year, we're all sitting there frustrated.
Well, you're on a first name basis with him now, dude. You could just go over there and text him.
He'll be like, never talk to me again.
Well, folks, that'll do it for this episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. We will get this posted as soon as possible. I'm going to run over to the Big Data Bowl, see if I can get anything out of that. And I'm going to break down this whole thing and get back on a flight to Seattle, where tomorrow, at some point, I will do another show. So I'm going to probably be posting stuff on the flight. If the internet's good enough for me to be able to do that, we'll find out. If not, some of it will come up later. But it's going to be great. A lot of really, really good stuff. And it's been so fun to be here with you guys. So I wish everybody could be here with us. Maybe we'll get more credentials next year, get the whole crew here. Although, I don't know if would Evan like know what to do here?
No. He'd be great at night.
He'd be great for the 10 minutes we get to talk to Mike or the 10 minutes we get to talk to John. But
I think he would have got escorted out by Seahawks PR. Like,
Probably.
don't let this guy around our team, please.
Probably. He's on a list. He's on some list for sure.
There's enough shows Evan might find.
Yes. All right. Well, folks, thank you for tuning in. Make sure you give the show a like, click subscribe. Also, if you haven't already, now is a great time to go to simplyseattle.com. Make sure you use promo code HawkBlogger15. Get 15% off your Simply Seattle Seahawks, Mariners, whatever Seattle sports gear you want to get. Also, go over to Doer, shop Doer, DUER.com/Hawk. You get 15% off your first order. I'm wearing my Doer jeans. They are so comfortable. They use CoolMax technology to kind of keep your body temperature in a nice range, not too hot, not too cold. They're also stretchy, but they don't look stretchy. They've got a lot of stuff beyond denim, but denim is kind of their wheelhouse. So go to shopdoer, SHOPDUER.com/Hawk. And finally, make sure you go to get the Sleeper app. If you haven't already downloaded it, now is a great time to download the Sleeper app. Use promo code Hawks. Get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions do apply. See Sleeper terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 25 states. Check out Sleeper today. And finally, if you have not bought We Did Not Care, you can get that at hawkblogger.com/book. And if you've got it at Amazon, or if you've already read it somewhere else, there are 0 reviews for it on Amazon. So be the first person to leave a review for my book on Amazon. Would appreciate it. It is the #1 new release book in the football category. I don't know how you guys have done it, but you have. Thank you for the support. We'll figure out some more book signings coming up in the next week and beyond. All right, everybody, have a great rest of your day. Take care.